Hello humans, and welcome back to another episode of the Housepod, a podcast where we explore practical issues and applications of faith. It's a rainy, gloomy June day here at the house, and we're so glad you've decided to join us. My name is Natalie Kendel. I'm a theologian and pastor here at the house, and I'll be presenting today's topic, which is titled, One Glass is One Too Many. Today we're talking about alcohol, drinking. There are a lot of myths surrounding drinking alcohol. There seems to be a never-ending march of misinformation out there about drinking, and even within spaces which advocate a sober lifestyle, distortions or untruths abound. So today we're going to be addressing some of those myths. Most attention tends to be given to the physical effects of drinking, but we're going to be looking at some studies which expand our understanding of the communal and the psychological effects of drinking, and we'll be especially focusing on the effect of adults drinking around children. Just to share a bit about my personal background with this, I grew up in an environment which was likely similar to that of many of our listeners today. It was a Christian religious environment, both at school and in our congregation. And being specifically from a Seventh-day Adventist background, alcohol was a big no-no. It had sort of huge skull and cross signs around it, police crime scene tape around it. Adventists place a great emphasis on physical health, teaching about diet, exercise, and the harmful use of substances. So within that teaching, any use of alcohol, tobacco, illegal drugs was loudly admonished and condemned, along with the consumption of red meat, pork, refined foods, and caffeine. And so that was the context that I was familiar with, the teaching which I grew up with, and so did most other Adventists. And warning against the use of alcohol is a common teaching in other religious denominations too. In primary school, middle school, secondary school, and into college, alcohol for us was a frequently brought up topic, with presentations and visiting speakers, and warning posters in the school hallway and health expos. Teens were warned to avoid it. Young people were warned against its harms and told to resist peer pressure. And amid all that well-intentioned education was also a fair amount of fear-mongering and shock methods, which, as I've witnessed many times in the past decades, had a sort of whiplash opposite effect on many who grew up Adventist, causing them to actually dive into the world of alcoholism or drinking casually or heavily as a sort of reaction to the highly restrictive and taboo culture which an Adventist education and church life created. But then, there are other church pockets where alcohol is not treated with quite so much animosity, and this can be a result of doctrine or local culture, or simply a disinterest in focusing on this. The angle which we're coming at alcohol consumption in today's episode is not just a general purview. We're not looking at the full picture of the harms which alcohol can bring about, nor are we looking at the mishandling of anti-alcohol teaching in Adventist education. Nor are we considering in depth the failure to understand addiction within Adventism or among other Christians. But instead we're focusing on a very particular dynamic, namely the impact of any adult alcohol consumption on children. Now, why have we decided to choose this particular focus? Well, summer is upon us. with all its sun-soaked backyards, its holidays, travelling to foreign countries, adventures, tanning on white sandy beaches, tasting delicious cuisine, barbecues, family get-togethers, celebrations, parties, graduations, and the list goes on. In short, it's a season when many Westerners centre around enjoyment and social leisure. So that enjoyment and leisure often includes other people, and it often includes alcohol. This summer, hundreds of thousands of Christians and non-Christian adults alike will consume alcohol, to a small degree, to a large degree, but many will drink. Not only that, but drinking alcohol increases in numbers during the summer, both in terms of how many people drink and how much they drink. Alcohol sales go up in the summer, and a study from the publication Alcoholism, Clinical and Experimental Research, published in June 2022, it was found that people tend to binge drink more in the summer, often due to social gatherings and increased leisure time. Now, there's a few main points why alcohol consumption tends to go up during the summer. We'll sum them up in 4 points. Number 1, the weather and physical cues. Heat and light make people more active and social. They tend to go out more, they tend to travel more, they tend to be awake for longer. Longer daylight hours equals longer parties, more barbecues, more social events. Now, in conjunction with this, alcohol is often marketed by its sellers as refreshing. Think cold beers, fruity cocktails, chilled wine. People associate drinking with cooling off, even though alcohol actually dehydrates and warms the body. And on the chemical level, the sunlight boosts dopamine and serotonin, increasing social behavior and risk-taking, which can lower inhibitions around drinking. So people who might not usually drink are more likely to do so during the summer. Number 2, cultural and social norms. Summer is, as we said, tied to vacations, festivals, and holidays. 4th of July, bank holidays, music festivals, settings where drinking is normalized or even expected. Then there's this powerful summer freedom narrative. No school, lighter work schedules, more outdoor gatherings. Alcohol, through repeated messaging, has become a type of symbol of freedom and letting loose in social and collective psyche. And so when people mentally want to step into more freedom or a more carefree mental state, their brain, because it's received so much messaging, might reach for or suggest drinking in order to reach the state of said freedom or relaxation. And then there's also the element of peer pressure. Drinks culture often ramp up in the summer and in social settings, especially among young people and in nightlife-heavy cities. But also, and we don't talk about this enough, it also ramps up in family and home settings, when family members are pressured or expected to partake in festive drinks, to be part of the family, to enjoy the atmosphere, to take part in the fun. Number 3 is something we've already alluded to, the alcohol industry's marketing. Summer is, as we said, peak season for targeted alcohol advertising. Think back to the alcohol adverts which you've seen online, on billboards, on television. It's often sun-soaked. It's set in quaint Italian villages during summer, with light bleeds on the screen, women in bikinis and big hats, meat grilling, rich, attractive people jumping off yachts into the ocean, plates with delicious food set in France, pool parties, rooftop bars, scenes all carefully designed to make you associate summer with drinking. And products like hard seltzers, Summer ales and rosé are pushed hard during this time of year, reinforcing the seasonal pattern of increased drinking. And finally, number 4 is coping mechanisms. Because for some people, summer isn't a bright and happy time. It brings stress or overstimulation, social pressures or loneliness, especially if others around you are having fun and you're not. And alcohol can become a tool to self-medicate or numb through that. The increase in domestic violence and public aggression shoots up during the summer. And you may have observed that higher temperatures correlate with more violent behavior. Alcohol exacerbates that. And that's even without us getting into the connection between increased televised or attended sports events, men watching sports, and the link between that and domestic violence. So just to sum up, we see more public displays of drinking alcohol during the warmer months. Summer is peak season for alcohol consumption, even among people who might not regularly drink. And this drinking is not restricted to clubs, bars, pubs, or parties for young people. It is woven into the events of family get-togethers, family socializing, and meals. And what does that mean? Well, it means that children will witness, will see, will feel the consumption of alcohol this summer. Because most families have underage members in it. Most nuclear and extended families have at least one child member, meaning that at least one child in that family will witness or be affected by someone drinking alcohol this summer. Whether this takes place in a family home garden, or in a lunch taken in a cafe, or on family vacation. Why is this significant? Why should we be paying attention to this? Is it a problem when children don't actually see the bottle of wine? Does drinking affect a child if adults are not visibly or heavily drunk? Well, those are the questions we'll be getting into and answering today. We're going to be exploring the often overlooked impact of adult alcohol consumption on children, focusing particularly on the social and psychological harms that can arise, even when adults are not visibly drunk or abusive. We will also address the underestimation of what it means to be blackout drunk. We will correct common misconceptions and examine virtual reality experiments that illustrate the emotional experience of children exposed to intoxicated adults. Through scientific evidence, sociological analysis, and psychological theory, we will aim to dismantle the myth that drinking in moderation around children is harmless. To begin, let's look at the paradoxical place which alcohol occupies in our society. Alcohol is both celebrated and normalized as a social lubricant and deeply embedded in cultural traditions. Yet, it remains a major public health concern. While many are aware of the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption, the more subtle and normalized forms of drinking, particularly in family settings and around children, often escape scrutiny. Alcohol is ugly and dangerous when in the hands of certain people, but suddenly becomes harmless or just a bit of fun in the hands of others. We frown and tut at people drinking themselves into a stupor at nightclubs, but we accept happily when grandma brings out the brandy at Christmas dinner. We understand the troubles of alcoholism, but we don't consider it a problem when people we know use drinking to regulate their emotions. A glass of wine at dinner, cocktails at a barbecue, or beers at a family gathering may seem harmless. They are talked about and used as though they are harmless, and many people can't understand what the problem is, what the threat is. But growing evidence shows that even light, non-violent alcohol consumption in the presence of children or while having a minor in your care can have profound psychological and emotional consequences on that child. Part 1. The normalization and minimization of harm. The normalization of alcohol in many cultures leads to widespread underestimation of its risks, particularly in family environments. In societies where drinking is a central part of celebrations, social bonding, or relaxation, its presence around children is rarely questioned. However, normalization should not be confused with harmlessness. Children are highly perceptive, and they internalize the behaviors and emotional atmospheres around them. Numerous studies have shown that children of parents who drink, even moderately, experience greater emotional uncertainty, anxiety, and insecurity than those whose parents abstain. According to a 2017 report by the Institute of Alcohol Studies in the UK, children exposed to moderate parental drinking exhibited signs of emotional distress, including worry, embarrassment, and confusion. The research also indicated that even lightly inebriated adults underestimate the level of danger or unpredictability they perceive, which means that children are often compromised, put at risk, their fears ignored, thus further intensifying their fear around drinking adults. It is a myth that adults must be visibly intoxicated or abusive for alcohol to impact children. In fact, the unpredictability associated with even minor changes in parental behavior, altered speech, shifts in mood, shift in body language, exaggerated expressions, can cause the child distress. Children lack the cognitive framework to understand these changes as alcohol-induced. From their point of view, these behaviors from their adult carers are experienced as signs of instability or abandonment. The early exposure to normalized drinking behaviors subtly conditions children to view alcohol as an acceptable, even necessary element of adult life. And this conditioning increases the likelihood that they themselves will engage in similar behaviors as they grow older, and massively increases the chances of them falling victim to future addiction. Think about it. If drinking is associated with celebration, comfort, or stress relief, children are going to learn to associate alcohol with what? With emotional management, with reinforcing maladaptive coping mechanisms. If a young girl or boy sees their mother regulating her emotions by drinking, this cements a subconscious connection in that child's brain. And in the future, when they are feeling stressed or anxious or unsure or sad, depressed, lonely, angry, and they need to regulate their emotions, well, the groundwork has already been laid. They are far more likely going to reach for a bottle of alcohol because they've been taught that this is how you regulate your emotions. This is how you process feelings. This is how you survive and get through difficult things. Or this is how you cure your loneliness, shyness, social anxiety. Alcohol becomes viewed as the doorway to the solution of your problems. Do you feel lonely and have no friends? Do you need a way to break through your social anxiety and talk to people? Well, here's the answer. Drink. The very fact that we call alcohol a social lubricant testifies to the fact that this connection is strong and assumed by many. The underlying message being that drinking will help you connect with people. When, as we will see, it's actually the opposite. Alcohol is a relationship killer, both between adults and between adults and children. So the messaging is, are you struggling with the feelings of rage or anger? Well, have a drink. This will regulate those emotions for you, or perhaps numb you, or perhaps just make you forget. Children learn first and foremost how to deal with and regulate their emotions from their parents or from their adult caregivers, not by what those adults verbally tell them, but by watching adult behavior. The way you regulate your emotions as an adult is going to be how your children likely learn to regulate their emotions. And so if you're using alcohol as a mood affector in any way, as an emotion regulator, to make you happy or sad or quiet or calm or more fun, it will all trickle into their heads and lay the foundation for their adult lives. Let's go deeper into this in our next part. Part 2, the psychological impacts on children. The psychological consequences of being around adults who are drinking range from immediate confusion to long-term emotional regulation issues. Research published in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs in 2019 found that children exposed to parental drinking, even when not abusive, were more likely to experience anxiety disorders and develop insecure attachment styles. These children often grow up with impaired emotional intelligence. They struggle to understand or trust their own feelings and the feelings of others. One key factor in this dynamic is the erosion of perceived safety. A parent who is drinking, even lightly, even in the absence of the child, may be less emotionally available, less responsive to their child's needs, or is likely to behave inconsistently. Now, children depend on predictability. They depend on emotional attunement to feel safe. When these things are compromised, the child's foundational trust in their environment is threatened. Attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby, emphasizes the necessity of a secure and reliable caregiver for healthy psychological development. But alcohol, by altering a caregiver's behavior and reliability, threatens that attachment bond. Even a slight delay in responsiveness or an uncharacteristic emotional reaction caused by alcohol can signal to a child that their caregiver is not present or dependable. This immediately causes a cascading effect of fear or feeling lonely and potential trauma, which stays with the child into adulthood. Children may also experience a phenomenon known as role reversal or parentification. If a parent becomes less competent or emotionally unstable for any reason, children may feel the need to assume a parental role. When adults are experienced as not present or inconsistent due to drinking, children may feel the need to take on responsibilities beyond their age, doing things like soothing the parent, making decisions, taking care of siblings, or, instead of bringing their emotions and challenges to the parent, may go away and self-isolate and try to deal with it themselves. This early and inappropriate shift in roles can result in lasting emotional scars and contribute to perfectionism, anxiety, or burnout in adulthood. Part 3. The hidden danger of blackouts. I used to have a friend who had also grown up in an Adventist context, and she was going through a challenging time in her life. During this time, her family invited her to join them for a holiday in a foreign country. Beaches, sunshine, hotels, that sort of thing. Attending this holiday was her siblings, one of her parents, and one of her siblings' children. Now, this family did what many other families do during holiday. As the sun is setting, they put their young ones to bed, to sleep back at the hotel, and then some or all of the adults go out to enjoy the local nightlife, going to a restaurant or a beach or a nightclub. My friend ended up going to a club with her siblings, and there was drinking of alcohol among them. Now she, who hadn't drunk before, and seeking perhaps to numb or self-medicate that night because of things that she was going through, she had something to drink. Now it's important to make this clear. When she was telling me the story of her experience that night, she pointed out that she didn't drink a lot. She didn't feel sick the next day, but had come away from her first brush with alcohol rather unscathed. And in her estimation, she had just had a light buzz, leading her to feeling more relaxed and not being massively affected by what she'd had to drink. Now, I'd like to state that this woman is an intelligent, perceptive person. She has a good head on her shoulders, she is socially aware, and she's not in the habit of exaggerating or blowing off personal responsibility. But her sister, however, recounted to my friend the next day how my friend had behaved the night before when they were drinking. Things she'd said, things she'd done, and my friend had no memory of saying or doing a lot of those things. This surprised her, as she didn't consider herself to be heavily inebriated, but she clearly failed to recall or remember parts of that night. After recounting this experience to me, she continued to believe that that night had been of little consequence and had lacked any dramatic long-term or short-term effects. None of the adults who were drinking thought that they were affecting the child that was on holiday with them in a negative way, since he was back at the hotel, safe and sound in bed. No problem. And like I said, my friend at the time continued to make light of her so-called light drinking. Now, you may have heard of the term blackouts, to be blackout drunk. Blackouts are often misunderstood by the general public, presenting a significant danger. Many people assume that being blackout drunk means passing out or losing consciousness. But that's not what blackout means. Being blackout drunk refers to memory loss during intoxication. Memory loss in which individuals continue to function, sometimes with alarming normalcy, but fail to form lasting memories. This means that an adult can engage in conversations, make decisions, and interact with others while appearing relatively normal, yet later they have no recollection of those events. My friend, because of her ignorance about alcohol and its effects, didn't realize that she had in fact been blackout drunk. She had experienced memory loss. She had experienced lost time. She had portions of what she'd said and done the night before which she couldn't remember. And keep this in mind, she'd only had a little to drink. She wasn't even violently sick the next day, but she had been blackout drunk. Now, what happens when you black out and engage with a child? Remember, you can seem perfectly sober. You can be functionally normal, not slurring your speech, not stumbling around. You seem fine. But you say and do things you wouldn't usually, or you forget that you said or done certain things. What would happen if my friend and her siblings returned to the hotel that night and the young child which was with them woke up from a nightmare and needed comfort from his mother, or sought safety in my friend who is his aunt. And this person, whom he had trusted since birth, who seems to be the person he knows, who seems to be in their right mind, but is somehow just a bit off. What if they say something strange, acts a little left of safe, says or does something they don't remember the next day? How would this child experience that? Any responsible parent will tell you that you're never off the job. You are never not a parent. You have to be available at all times for your children if there is an emergency or if they are in need. There is no, well, they're asleep now, so I can go get drunk and they won't be affected. What if they need you? What if they get sick? What if they have a nightmare and come to you? You can't magically snap your fingers and undrunk yourself. For children, this presents a terrifying paradox. The adult may appear to be there, but is in fact psychologically absent. A child may recount an emotionally charged conversation, a promise made, or an experience shared, only to be met later with complete amnesia or denial. That can feel to a child no different than being gaslit. This dynamic can be deeply disorienting and traumatizing. It erodes the child's sense of reality. It leads them to question their own perception and to assume responsibility for the adult's inconsistencies. Some children will simply conclude that, oh, well, this adult seems to not always tell the truth, or seems to not always be reliable. Or they may turn that blame inwards and say, oh, did I not understand that? Did I not perceive that situation in the right way? Did I misunderstand something? Is this my fault? Research by Aaron White, a leading expert in alcohol-induced blackouts, shows that such memory lapses are more common than assumed, even among those who do not consider themselves heavy drinkers. His work reveals that blackouts often occur when blood alcohol concentration rises quickly, such as drinking social events where drinks are consumed rapidly or mixed, and this places many social drinking scenarios in the danger zone, even for seemingly casual drinkers. Children who grow up in environments where blackout drinking is a regular occurrence are likely to develop hypervigilance and learn to monitor adults closely for signs of unpredictability. This can lead to chronic stress responses, including adrenal fatigue, sleep disturbances, and difficulty relaxing. The long-term effects is an internalized belief that safety is fragile and emotional stability is fleeting. Now, my friend had a close and good relationship with her nephew. It was clear to me that her nephew trusted her and shared things with her, and she was viewed as a caretaker, a caregiver in his life. But she and her siblings put that child in danger and under threat that night, and probably have many other nights too. And no matter how much my friend may have loved and deeply cared for this boy, because she sought emotional regulation or escape through alcohol that night, she betrayed him. She betrayed his trust. Even if he never woke up, even if he never saw her in that state, that was a betrayal, and she risked doing him harm. But she didn't see that. It wouldn't even enter her mind that this was dangerous, that her choices were risking affecting a child detrimentally in profound and long-term and scarring ways. And that blind spot, that ignorance is not uncommon. That is why I'm bringing up this story, It is very common among people who drink, even leisurely drinkers, even one-time drinkers. People generally do not understand, or sometimes do not care, how this affects minors and what blackouts are and how they affect children. Part 4. VR experiments and empathy-inducing media. Recent experiments in Scandinavia and the UK have used the resource of virtual reality to give sober adults the experience of being a child among drunk adults. One particularly striking project conducted in Norway placed adults in a simulated environment through VR goggles, where the view through these goggles was from the perspective of a child. So virtual reality allowed them to experience becoming a child, watching their parents drink and slowly lose control. The scenario beamed at them through these goggles escalated from mild, jovial inebriation to more erratic behavior. And the effect this virtual reality show had on those adults. Some were completely stunned into silence. Some participants were visibly shaken. Several of the participants broke down in tears and even ripped off the VR goggles because they couldn't take it anymore. It was just an experiment, an unreal video. The adults knew that this isn't really happening, but they felt the emotion of fear. They were scared, disgusted, and shaken by it. BuzzFeed produced a similar video about a decade ago, where adults again used VR to inhabit the perspective of a child during a dinner party where the parents and guests began drinking. The adults who took part reported feeling the following emotions. They felt powerless, anxious, and frightened, even though the parents were not overtly violent. What disturbed them most was the unpredictability of behavior and the loss of connection with the adults in the scene. I would highly recommend that you go and watch those videos. I've linked them in the description box below. Watch those videos because they are undeniable proof that the experience, even for autonomous adults, was frightening. These and similar experiments affirm what child psychologists and trauma experts have long been saying. Children do not have the tools to cognitively manage sudden shifts in emotional tone, loss of attunement, or bizarre adult behavior. And they are more sensitive to those shifts than adults are. These scenarios teach children to disassociate, to suppress their emotional responses, and to internalize feelings of abandonment and confusion, all of which can and do lead to long-term mental health issues. You know, we see drinking so much in the media around us. In movies, TV series, adverts, reality shows, it's so normalized. Media representations of alcohol plays a role in how we think about drinking. Popular shows and films often portray drinking as fun, glamorous, or cathartic, but rarely showing the silent impact on children in the background. And there are so often children in the background. Campaigns aimed at shifting this narrative through documentaries, testimonials, or fiction centered on a child's experience can be powerful tools for awareness, and we should watch these resources because they will help to shift our thinking. Again, I highly urge you to watch some of those videos that are linked in the description below. Part 5. The sober adult's experience. It is not only children who suffer in the presence of drinking adults. Sober adults whether they are in recovery, whether they are abstaining for personal or religious reasons, or simply choosing not to drink, often find themselves in uncomfortable and triggering situations when other adults are drinking. Drunk people are unpredictable, often louder, often more impulsive, less connected, less aware, less sensitive, and prone to behavior that crosses social or emotional boundaries. For many, especially those with a history of trauma or who have experienced abuse, being surrounded by drinking peers can be deeply distressing. The assumption that someone is fine because they aren't leaving the party ignores the complexity of social pressure, fear of exclusion, or learned patterns of people-pleasing. Many sober individuals endure such gatherings in silence, suppressing their discomfort to avoid confrontation. Moreover, being a witness to others' intoxication can reawaken past traumas, especially for those who grew up in homes where alcohol caused instability, or who had a parent or both parents who were emotionally unstable. So watching a friend slowly change under the influence, laughing too loudly, making inappropriate jokes, being reckless or forgetful, can activate the fight or flight responses, heightening stress, hypervigilance, and social withdrawal. Being around friends who drink, even when you don't, can be a frightening and triggering experience. But many people only have friends who drink, and so it's either be alone and never spend social time with others, or it's being around drunk people. This social invisibility compounds the problem because sober people often feel like outliers in social contexts where alcohol is assumed. This can discourage honesty and vulnerability, both of which are necessary to shift the culture toward greater empathy and inclusivity, and are also necessary for deep and proper relationships to exist. Part 6. Cultural blind spots and denial. A significant challenge in addressing the harm caused by drinking around children lies in cultural denial. Many adults rely on alcohol not only for pleasure but as a coping mechanism. Suggesting that drinking around children may be harmful is often met with defensiveness or ridicule. Phrases like, "I'm not a drunk," "I've only had one glass," or "it's a family tradition," serve to protect the habit from scrutiny. Sociologist Joseph Gusfield, in his book The Culture of Public Problems, explains that how a society defines a problem determines whether it will address it. And in cultures where alcohol is not viewed as problematic unless it results in physical violence or addiction, emotional harm remains invisible, remains unaddressed. Yet the science increasingly confirms that the emotional consequences of alcohol, particularly on children, are both very real and far-reaching. We can deny it all we like, it remains a fact. In the same way addiction or alcohol use was a stigma and taboo topic in the Adventist setting which I grew up in, the stigma surrounding abstinence or sobriety is also very real in general secular society. Adults who choose not to drink are often viewed as judgmental, boring, or antisocial. This further isolates those who might otherwise speak up against drinking in family settings. In doing so, the culture reinforces silence and enables harm. Education campaigns about alcohol often fall short. Why is this the case? Because they often focus on extreme examples, such as addiction or domestic violence, being homeless, beating your wife, wasting all your money. These extreme examples are focused on rather than the insidious everyday habits that set the stage for emotional harm. Teens sit there in church thinking, well, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't drink that much, only on weekends when I go out. And I drink because it helps me to talk to people. I'm usually shy and socially anxious. The problems they're talking about isn't about me. Or the adult who hears about the harms of alcohol might think, well, that's not me. I don't stumble home. I don't puke in bushes. I don't slur my speech. I enjoy one glass of wine with my dinner. That's all. It doesn't affect my children. I'm Italian. Of course I'm going to have a glass of wine. There's a constant minimizing of effects which even a little alcohol consumption produces. And shifting the conversation to include those subtler forms of harm is essential if any change is going to be made. Part 7. Toward a new cultural ethic. In order to create a safer and more emotionally supportive environment for children, we must reevaluate our cultural and personal relationship with alcohol. This begins with education. Disseminating accurate information about what alcohol does to behavior, perception, and relationships, even in small doses. Psychologist Laura Markham, author of Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids, emphasizes the importance of parental self-regulation. Children do not need perfect parents, but they do need present ones. Alcohol, by its very nature, interferes with presence. That means it interferes with relationship. Whether through slight mood shifts, reduced responsiveness, or full-scale blackouts, alcohol erodes the very attunement which children rely on. And just like we covered earlier, children learn how to regulate themselves, regulate their own emotions by how trusted adults around them regulate theirs. I'd like to point out that once, not so long ago, smoking around children was considered harmless. I had a friend in primary school who had severe asthma, and her mother smoked like a chimney, smoked in their home, smoked constantly. And I watched as this poor girl sucked on her inhalers and wheezed during gym class, and her mother was either too selfish or perhaps too ignorant to bum her cigarettes for good. Public policy can play a part, just as we have seen shifts in attitudes towards smoking around children, once considered harmless, now widely condemned. The same shift is possible for alcohol. Public awareness campaigns, parental support networks, and trauma-informed education in schools can help to dismantle the myth of any harmless social drinking, because there is no such thing. We must normalize and celebrate sobriety, not based in shame, not based in fear tactics, but based in facts and based on love for one another and a dedication to the relationships in our lives. Community events, rituals, and gatherings that do not involve alcohol offer alternatives to those seeking genuine connection without the cost of emotional detachment. Celebrating sobriety as strength and love for others rather than sacrifice is a step toward cultural change. And notice I said love for others, because drinking, just like with all behavior, is not just about you. It's never just about you. All the things we do, even in secret, even in private, affect other people, sometimes in ways we can't even see. And even if you didn't believe that, even if you didn't believe that your private or quiet drinking affected others, I would say, well, it does affect one person, you. And that person matters. Doesn't that person deserve emotional regulation that's healthy? Doesn't that person deserve safety and not to experience memory blackouts? So as we go into summer, as we spend time with others and make our decisions, I would invite everyone to consider and reconsider who they'd like to be in the world and in their relationships, how they want to affect others and how they want to affect children. If you can't find the will to take care of yourself enough to not drink alcohol, then find the will or the help to protect your children and the other human beings in your life enough to not drink. Not just to not drink around them, but to not drink alcohol at all. Because with every sip, you are making a choice for how much you value or don't value their safety, their regulation, their experience of you as a friend or as a trusted person, their experience around you, their emotional well-being. You are deciding whether or not to love them. Loving others is seeking to not do them harm, but seeking the best for them. And alcohol, without exception, does harm. Despite all the messaging and all the campaigns about how alcohol is fine, and all the lies that we've been told over and over and over again, all the minimizing, all the excusing, all the romanticizing of drinking. In conclusion, the belief that moderate or light, non-abusive drinking around children is harmless is not only unfounded but deeply dangerous. From subtle behavioral changes to the severe psychological confusion caused by blackouts, alcohol can damage the trust, the safety, and the emotional well-being of children in ways that are invisible in the moment, but long-lasting in effect. It erodes relationships. And this is also true for other adults who interact with us when we drink. To protect children, to honor the people we care about, and indeed to foster more emotionally intelligent and connected adults, we must challenge our assumptions about drinking and educate ourselves on the reality of alcohol's impact. We must foster a culture, even if that is a culture which exists in our homes, in our families, or in our friend groups. We must foster a culture there where sobriety is normalized and respected, not in the ways which have been done in Adventism and so many other religious settings, through excessive fear tactics and taboo culture and purity rants, but with emotional intelligence, with genuine care for people's well-being, with an understanding and a care about relationship building, and for kind and clear honesty. The cost of inaction is not only paid by the drinker, but by the smallest and most vulnerable witnesses to our choices. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Housepod. If you'd like to listen to more episodes, feel free to subscribe and follow us. And you'll also find a host of Bible stories, music, and all sorts of other videos here on the House's channel. Also, if you're new to our channel, you can become a channel premium member, getting early access to videos, bespoke emojis and reactions, access to voting on polls, and it also gives you a wonderful and easy way to monetarily support what we're doing here. If that sounds like something you'd like to do, you can go to our channel, click the tab at the top of the page where it says membership, and take it from there. We pray that God's spirit of relationship and the honouring of children inspires us to better and kinder choices. And that if there is anyone out there today who is listening and who thinks they might be struggling to emotionally regulate without alcohol, please know that you don't need to flood yourself with shame or self-hatred. Addiction and struggling with alcohol is very real, and I promise that the right people and the right support system can help you to replace that regulator with something so much better and even more potent. Until next time, bye from us at the Housepod. See you later.